Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Uncensored CMO. Now, one topic I absolutely love is innovation. I really love talking to founders, finding out how they did it. And this next guest is Ben Branson, the founder of Seedlip. I totally admire what Ben has achieved with Seedlip. It is genuinely one of those innovations that transformed the category and did something that no one else has done before. So I caught up with Ben in this episode to find out a bit more about what's it like being a founder, how difficult was it to come up with something genuinely groundbreaking, brand new in the category. I also wanted to chat to Ben a little bit about his charity that he's just set up and his own podcast called The Hidden 20%, which focuses on people in neurodiversity. I think what Ben's doing is very special, and so I wanted to dig in a little bit about what inspired that and how it's impacted the world. It's a great conversation. I know you're going to love it. Here it is. Ben, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now we are here and we've got a lovely lineup of Seedlip. So I probably should ask, as the founder of Seedlip, where did it all start? Where did the idea for this come from?
Definitely. So I think I must have been asked this question, this is no offense to you, John. I must have been asked this question probably 10,000 times in the last 10 years. And I have to keep it interesting for myself. So I've never told it the same way twice. But it didn't start as a business idea. It wasn't one of those, I've spotted a gap in the market. It wasn't even actually, I went out and had a really dreadful non-alcoholic drink and thought, oh my God, I know what the world needs. I like being at home and I'm from a farming family, so I live in the countryside. Don't come to London more than I need to. And so I was living in this little Hansel and Gretel cottage out in Buckinghamshire, in the woods, growing stuff at home, herbs, veg, and looking into the kind of weird stuff that I do, looking into herbs that may have been lost or looking into different seeds I could get hold of. Got on the internet, bought some old books, came across a copy of this book called The Art of Distillation. And I've got a 1664 copy of this book. I should have brought it to show you. It's called The Art of Distillation. It's a little book originally published in 1651. It's basically a recipe book for herbal remedies using distillation. Some of them make alcohol, some of them don't make alcohol. I thought this was pretty cool. And I bought a little copper still off the internet, a little 2.5 litre copper still, and just started having a go. And this was literally picking mint from my garden and making a liquid that smelt and tasted like that plant, which, if anyone listening, or if you've ever had the chance to distill something, it's really magical. And I was hooked. So I kept doing it. Tried loads of different things, nothing to do with drinks. I was running a design agency at the time. This was evenings and weekends. And then I had the moment of going to London to a nice restaurant. I think there were 4 of us. Drinks list comes, looks amazing. Beautiful cocktail list, lovely wines. Do you want still, sparkling? Get the food menu, nice atmosphere. Everyone's happy. We're out for dinner. But I'm driving. I'm not drinking alcohol. And so I asked, have you got anything that's non-alcoholic? And there wasn't sure, yeah, absolutely. There wasn't anything in the menu. I couldn't see anything on the back bar. And so what came over was the tray, a couple of beautiful glasses of wine, lovely cocktail, and my pink, disgusting, fruity, ridiculous mocktail horribleness. I just felt like an idiot because we've all been there. You're you're sat at the table, the drinks come over. What are you having? And I'm like, I'm just embarrassed, actually. I couldn't finish it. I didn't want another one. It didn't go with the food. I wasn't even really told what it was. Little psychological things, like it didn't have a name. It wasn't in the menu. And so I left just thinking, why is it so difficult? That was it. I just thought, why is it so hard? We've got amazing alcoholic options. We've got amazing food options, regardless of allergies, preferences, etc. We've got all this choice. And yet, if you are not drinking alcohol for whatever reason, your options are soft drinks and water, or some fruity, sweet, disgusting blend of. And so it was not an overnight moment. I didn't walk out thinking, well, I know what I need to do. I walked out just thinking, why are the options so rubbish? And this, I've noticed this over the last 10 years with new ideas. Actually, I can't come up with great ideas on the spot. I need time. I need some marination, for want of a better phrase. I talk to my team about needing to take things for a walk. Not a literal walk, but like just a walk in my head. And so it was probably another 3-4 months before I sort of joined the dots of maybe I could work with my mum and the farm. Maybe I can work with my dad who's in the design industry. Maybe there's something interesting in this pot still and what I'm doing at home. Maybe actually there could be a need for a decent non-alc option. And then it was all very small and gradual. Maybe I'll take it to a farmer's market. Maybe I'll do this as a little fun project. I work for a design agency. Well, how cool would it be to kind of say to my clients, yeah, I know you founded your business and look, I founded my little brand. And that, ended up then being a 2-year process, leaving the design agency, life savings go in. There's no farmer's market. I'm there launching it in Selfridges and taking it to the most incredible sort of bars and restaurants and not really having a clue what I was doing. But suddenly it taking over my life.
I think what I love about how you've described the story is that I've spent most of my career in soft drinks and a little bit in alcohol. And none of the companies I work for, I think, would have come up with what you came up with, because in soft drinks, like, we've been on a mission to find the drink for when you're not drinking, as you beautifully describe. I love the way you position that, by the way. But the margins in soft drink and the efficiency of the supply chain is all geared around getting things fast and cheap. And it's seen as the poor relation to the alcohol in terms of margins, and all that kind of thing. Then you go. I've worked at beer brands and spirit brands, for whom the idea of doing something non-alcoholic is like anathema. You know what I mean? So it's funny because as you describe that, I cannot imagine that ever being invented by any of the businesses I've worked for. They wouldn't have the patience. They wouldn't have the lateral thinking. It would kind of break their minds in terms of, because what you designed with Seedlip, and by the way, anyone who's listening that can't watch, it's absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
And the craft that goes in, the care that's gone in, the design, the aesthetic is incredible. Like, I can't imagine a soft drink company putting the level of effort that you've put into it. You've really taken the inspiration from real high-end spirits and applied it to something that doesn't have alcohol in.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge is it has been that binary, and it has been soft drinks or alcohol, never the two shall meet. And we forget that we think about soft drinks in like single serve format and cans and plastic and not really glass as much. And then we think about alcohol and we think about, or historically, well, that's in glass bottles and it's multi-serve. And so there are loads of huge differences, although they can obviously straddle lots of occasions. I think because I have definitely done my 10,000 hours, John, on thinking about this kind of stuff. So I did some work looking into what I'd call parallel movements of cigarettes and what's happened there, cars and what's happened there, meat and vegetarian side and what's happened there, and even beer and what's happened with the non-alc beers. And actually, it was one of those beautifully wonderful moments of going, holy shit. Am I okay to swear?
Go ahead, uncensored.
Oh, uncensored, good point. Holy shit, I figured it out. All of these, the first electric car was actually designed over 100 years ago. The first non-alcoholic beer was over 100 years ago. The first patent for an e-cigarette was over 100 years ago. The first soya-based sausage over 100 years ago. Even alternative milks over 100 years ago. So you kind of go, these are all really old ideas, actually. But then what happened was around the 70s, we had some people start trying to kind of play in that place. So everyone would have heard of Korn. What have we got? Prius was doing sort of alternative energy fuel type system for cars. Beck's Blue. In the beer side, we had those cigarettes that looked like cigarettes, but they were electronic, if you remember those. And they were all real compromises, actually. They were a bit downplayed. Prius was quite cool in its time, but Corn was kind of frozen and freezer, and the little cigarettes were a bit rubbish. And so and I would call them sort of the incumbents. And then we've had, in the last, 10, 15 years, we've had all the insurgents, and we've had Oatly, and we've had Tesla, and we've had, whether you like it or not, the likes of Juul. And we've had Athletic Brewing over in the US, who's done such an incredible job. And these have all come not from big corporates. They've come from new brands. And I guess that's what I've always sort of held on to, I guess, when people have told me that I was a lunatic or that Seedlip was the worst idea ever. I've always kind of tried to hold on to that understanding that, we have proof points within wider culture.
I think this is why innovators like you succeed, because big companies box themselves in. They operate to a margin. They have customers that buy in a certain way, and the cost of the serve must be way higher than you get in a normal soft drink where it's manufactured sugar, water, flavour, carbonated, and then it's done sort of thing. How hard was it to create the taste and serve, because you're setting a benchmark which is way higher than a soft drink would in terms of the experience that you're going to deliver? So how hard was it to match expectations? Because I'm guessing you're benchmarking, well, I want to feel as I'm having something as good as a premium gin and tonic.
So there are so many factors involved, I guess, sort of psychologically, in adding up to, I feel like I'm not having a less than experience, and I feel like I'm having a really grown up drink. And that can be, and so I could kind of plot so many of those from where you might find this drink. So if you found Seedlip in a newsagent's versus Selfridges, you're going to have a very different experience. If you were served a Seedlip and tonic in a top cocktail bar or a Michelin star restaurant versus, I don't know, your kind of local pub or, a coffee shop, you're going to have a different experience. And so even the fact that, they're glass bottles, they don't go in the fridge, they sit there on the back bar, the smallest words really on the bottle are non-alcoholic. And then we built this brand initially by association and by distribution. And so I never ever had to say that Seedlip was any good. That was my number one goal, was to never ever have to comment on whether Seedlip was delicious or not. I wanted to go, Heston Blumenthal thinks Seedlip is delicious, and he knows a lot about how things fucking taste. So if you don't like it, or you don't disagree with him, or disagree with, the food buyer from Selfridges or Harrods or whatever, disagree with those guys. Yeah, and so there were so many little factors of like selecting the right distribution, even having the right price point, which events we showed up at. I mean, we launched Seedlip, it wasn't even available to buy online. I was really against e-commerce. I had no idea. I'd never bought anything online. I was a total dinosaur. But going and showing up with Seedlip in gallery openings or polo events, or we just kind of established it in that premium space without ever having to say that it was premium either. It was like, let's never say that.
You mentioned premium price. I mean, this was one of those launches that I really noticed, because I thought, wow, that's genuinely not been done before. But the thing that's the packaging and the taste, all that sort of thing was amazing. The pricing, I'm like, what? Because when you come from a soft drink background, like your price per litre is just like breaks all conventions, because you're anchoring off a much more premium category and delivering it in just such a different way. Did you get any pushback on how much you were charging, or was your distribution, because you're going to Selfridges or the Fat Duck or something? Did that help establish that premium?
Yeah,
price?
I got plenty of pushback. I think the interesting thing about the pushback was, initially the pushback wasn't about Seedlip, and it wasn't about oh, you've used oak and allspice and I don't like those, or I don't like the taste of it. It was way upstream from that. It was, what is the point in a non-alcoholic drink? Literally that simple. Wow. And it was palpable. It was tangible. It was me standing in Selfridges serving people Seedlip and tonics, and a man coming up to me and going, what is this? And me going, this is Seedlip, it's a distilled non-alcoholic spirit, and him being angry with me.
Really? Wow.
And saying to me, why the fuck would you work for a company like this? No. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's my company. But so angry that a non-alcoholic option existed, which sounds so crazy to say, but it was, you know, we place so much importance without realizing on alcohol, on how we socialize, what we drink, and our drink choices actually being part of our identity. You know, everybody knows I'm only a beer drinker, or I only drink white wine, or she loves Prosecco, or oh, he's always on those health drinks, or he drinks those protein shakes, or, you know, we do much, I think, more than food. Drinks seem to be absorbed into sort of part of our identity, which is crazy because you can now go on Instagram and find thousands of influencers who are sober and teetotal, and that's how they earn their living. You know, which is kind of mad from where we were 10 years ago with such dreadful, real dreadful response. So that was way before I could even get to saying how much it was. I've already got to kind of try and explain to these people that you can't drink alcohol all the time, and shouldn't there be a great option? Like, what do you do when you're driving? So we spent a lot of time. And given we were the only non-alcoholic spirit from 2015 to 2018, so for the first 3 years, we were doing all category jobs. We were doing all the heavy lifting, all the education. And actually, if you imagine a kind of, you know, a pie chart, I'd say 85% of our time was focused on educating people that they deserve a great non-alcoholic option. 15% of our time was on kind of, let me tell you about Seedlip. But actually, talking to the world's best chefs and bartenders and people in hospitality, it sounds like ridiculous to be saying this now, but we were explaining that we think it's a great mark of hospitality in the modern age if you are offering great non-alc options. We think it's better for your business too, and you'll make more money and people will stay longer and have more drinks. We were having to do that hand and foot, like round, you know, going around every kind of bar, restaurant, etc.
This I think is the phase people don't realise, isn't it? Because I worked for Britvic for many years and did a little project looking at how long it takes for brands to succeed, and I worked out the average time was 7 years. So by the way, you're way ahead of that. But you know, you take a Fever Tree for example. Fever Tree, they were stuck in about 50 high-end bars for 5 or 6 years before they kind of broke through. And it's the education thing. It took them forever to go, well, if your gin and tonic's 3/4 tonic, make it a good tonic, you know, which now seems really obvious. But that education job took a long time. How did you kind of keep going through that period? Because you talked about you giving up your job. You've invested in, you know, it's not easy to produce. I'd like to know how it's produced actually. But then how did you kind of like back yourself for so long until, you know, of course, eventually everyone looks back and goes, well, of course, it was always going to be a success. I don't imagine through those periods you necessarily sat there and thought, of course, this is going to be a success.
No, I really hated the first 6 months, really hated the first 6 months, and genuinely wanted to close the business every week. And I know you hear people who started businesses say, oh yeah, we wanted to close it and we made all these mistakes, but I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. We went from me producing 1,000 bottles, and by the way, it was taking 6 weeks to make, and we were sourcing all these ingredients. And it kept selling out really quickly. And so I had to go from me on my own making 1,000 bottles to then 3-4 months later packing a white van with 7,000 bottles and driving it up to rent a bottling line up to Lancashire filling them, driving it back down, getting people around to come and label the bottles. So we were kind of 7xing production in the, easy within the first 6 months, and then actually having to hire a team. And I didn't really know anything about being a founder and what that meant. And so I think in my head, I thought, well, I just want to kind of make the liquid and sort of stay behind the scenes. I sort of was too naive to kind of go, well, no one else is going to fucking talk about this. And so I was also having to deal with, just being, we heard from 100 countries in the first 3 months. I was invited to Buckingham Palace. We had sit down having to do one-to-one cocktail sessions of teaching Kate Moss how to make drinks with Seedlip because she loved it. We were hearing from all these bartenders who are a global community. And so we had lots of people in touch. Yeah, it was. I was totally overwhelmed. Overwhelmed.
How did that happen? That sounds incredible, right? 100 countries, Kate
Yeah,
Moss,
no,
Buckingham.
nice problems. Nice
incredible.
Problems to have.
What was this? What generated? Was it the sheer novelty or the inspiration of it, or did word get out? What led to all that response? Do you know?
We had a really good full page write up. A journalist called Victoria Stewart, who's wonderful. Me and her did a bar crawl, and we did a bar crawl sort of, when would that have been? End of 2015, so just after we launched. And Seedlip was listed in 3 places. One of those was Dandelion, which went on to be the world's best bar. Yeah. The other one was Clove Club, the 2 Michelin star restaurant, and Selfridges was the other stockist. And she wrote this big page, wonderful piece. So we had some really good press. That was great. I think word seemed to get round the trade quite quickly, probably good and bad, and definitely felt like in all of our meetings, you knew where you stood. It was either a very quick meeting or it wasn't a meeting. And many of those people are the people that then we later heard are like, yeah, I was one of the first choices. Yeah, I knew it was going to be big.
Success has many fathers.
Yeah. Or we were having brilliant, in-depth meetings. And I was, we got selling online. I had this one customer who was buying it for her husband who was dying from cancer. And I was like, I'm coming to see you. I want to come and see you. And I've got this, I want to bring you the old book to come and look at. And I'd love to just come and spend some time with you. And amazing that it could sort of do all of that, what's real startup stuff, of really giving a shit about customers and really taking the time. But yeah, the industry is very small, and we talked about it, framing it of like, there are only 1,000 people that matter in the world for Seedlip. If we can get those 1,000 people, we've got the keys to everything else. Yeah. And it's same thinking that we're adopting with Season, with Silver, with all of our projects. 1,000 people matter. And those 1,000 for us were bartenders and chefs, I guess, and people in the drinks industry. But I walked into the American bar at the Savoy for a meeting with Eric, who was the head bartender at the time. And he was like, oh, nice. I was just hearing about you in Greece last week. And I'm like, what's going, this is... So yeah, I guess having what can people take from that of there was something pretty polarizing about having a non-alc option that was expensive and premium, that didn't sit in a fridge. And that was clearly talked about. And then just being super focused on not trying to be everywhere and really understanding who our first audience, our kind of first buyer was, rather than worrying too much about the end consumer.
I remember seeing a post from you actually that struck me. I think you recently shared the very first Gantt charts that you created for the business.
Yeah.
And you had this like offhand comment, something along the lines of like, this is the meticulous plan that I came up with and then never looked at again, sort of thing. What's been the balance between kind of planning for success and actually adapting as you go?
Oh, it's a really good question, because I with Seedlip, I literally did buy Business for Dummies. And, I remember going and talking to a friend sat upstairs in Whole Foods in South Ken to spend an hour with her while she taught me through what a value chain was. I wanted to understand every aspect of the P&L. I wanted to understand every job. I was absolutely voracious in my appetite to kind of, I don't know, learn what a business is and learn about the drinks industry and read what other founders had written and get case studies on Fever-Tree, Brewdog, Hendrix, Innocent. I was just absolutely voracious. And so then I guess sort of vomiting that out into kind of, okay, here are all the things I need to do to launch this. And, I was diagnosed autistic in 2022. So I can have an incredibly logical, analytical, rational brain and process of wanting to capture everything and getting that all in the right order. But because I had no idea that it's not how it fucking goes. And it doesn't really matter. Planning's one thing. I think planning now and thinking about launching new things, plans are not what's going to happen. They are an opportunity to think through what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because I spent way too much time. I wasted way too much time. And then I didn't even do it. So I didn't even follow that plan. And that's not how it went. And so even things like in those early days, forecasts and timings, and forget all the brand decks and tone of voice and onions and values and wheels and absolute bollocks, basically. You don't need any of it. You don't need any of it until you've got to tell other people about it. Because there are more people working on your brand and they probably aren't full-time. When you've got a full-time team, however small, working on it, you don't need any of that. It will be fine. And rightly or wrongly, definitely don't fucking pay an agency to help you with that. You can do a lot of that internally. But I do think that stress testing which channels you're going to sell in, at what price point, does the value chain work so that everybody gets their margin? What rate of sale do you think you need or could hit? What are the reference points for what that rate of sale is? Regardless of sort of what happened, you sort of got to do a plan, but I think someone told me twice as long and twice as much, and that's always what I've tried to stick to.
I think very often a plan is about convincing other people, not convincing yourself, actually, sometimes. Adam Morgan, who I think is like the guru of challenger brands, he's got this beautiful phrase called intelligent naivety, which I just think you're a really good example of, because I don't think you'd have done any of this if you'd come from the industry, right? Because you'd have had a billion reasons why this would not work, right? But I think the fact you didn't come from the industry, you came at it from a different perspective, and you didn't know the answers necessarily. He says the answers, quote unquote, like who does to some extent. But that probably helped you because you took leaps that other people would have gone, oh no, can't do that, or we got to plan for this or plan for that. I think that's could be a lot of it.
It's so top of mind now, knowing that with launching new things, and I know a bit more, but I want to maintain as much naivety as possible. And that's a delicate balance, because I definitely made loads of mistakes I didn't need to. I definitely wasted loads of money I didn't need to. But that, I don't know, just sort of lack of resources making you incredibly resourceful and going, great, I'm just going to email 500 of the best accounts in the UK and I'm going to ask them what non-alcoholic drinks they have on offer. Free, absolutely free to do that. And the results of that gave me such confidence and such an understanding of the landscape of, without driving around the country and without spending any money, the sort of state of play of how poor the non-alc options were. And so, having that kind of resourcefulness.
Well, you touched on another point there, actually, which is the beauty of the constraint of no budget, which people underplay that a bit. But you have to make your packaging the media channel. You have to make every customer your PR.
Yes.
You have to make the serve so good that people will tell their friends. And in a way, big companies become lazy because you just start what's the launch campaign? How much you're going to spend?
Yeah.
You haven't got that option. So you've got to make all of it work.
Yeah.
So much harder.
We're launching a shandy this summer, and we're doing it as a test. And next week we've got every single person in the team is going to pitch. They're going to do their launch. And because I don't like group brainstorms, and I think we're going to get amazing individual ideas, and then we're going to pull that together and do a launch plan. And we're doing it on a tiny budget, and we're doing it as because we want to test and bring shandy back. And we've made an amazing shandy, but also I think for a team where we've got 2 other brands to focus on, there's some sort of light relief and learning here in having real constraints, and just using your brain and being resourceful. I think is a good it's a good muscle to keep alive, and finding ways. We did this with Seedlip, finding ways to ensure that the team doesn't just become rigid or lazy in their thinking. I think it's really important.
Now, you've gone through the kind of innovator stage. You've got into Selfridges. You got into some of the best Michelin-starred restaurants. At what point did it kind of get to scale? To the point that you started getting interest from big organisations about partnering with you. When did that bit happen?
So I worked out that in our first 3 years we were growing faster than, you name it, Innocent, Brewdog, Fever-Tree, Hendrix. We were growing really fast, and ultimately we went to 35 countries in 3.5 years. We had 3 offices in 3 continents, and I spent a lot of time out of the UK on a plane and flying around and launching and opening markets with Seedlip, which I wouldn't want to do again, actually. It was kind of hell, and that's even with a non-alcoholic drink. So yeah, it was a lot. It all, the first year, it was fast and big, and it was relentless. There actually just wasn't even a moment to kind of, there wasn't a kind of, I don't know, I've not had it before in a business where you're like, it's just good, guys. Yeah, it's good. It's nice, just ticking along. It just wasn't. And that was either because we were dealing with problems, or stuff was happening and we were, launching another market or launching another product. It was just, it was fast and big. And, we took investment from Distill Ventures in 2016, to pretty early on. And that was good. That was very hands off, but we had the funding that we needed to kind of scale the business. And so, it was, interestingly, the spirits industry looks at those same, how long does it take to grow this kind of stuff? And they get to about 7 years before there's an intervention that's needed. And ultimately, we exited in 3.5 years, because the other mantra is, 10 years for an overnight success. We hear a lot in the drinks industry. And so actually, when you think that Seedlip's been going for 10 years, I had the brand, I guess, for 4 years. I'm still a shareholder now. I'm still involved. Categories now, tens and tens of billions of dollars, and there's thousands of options. I'm just clearly a sucker for punishment, because I want to go right back to the beginning, into the independent startup, scrappy, messy bit. Yeah, it was really relentless. It was really stressful.
Any advice on that? I think people are surprised to know how stressful success is. I think people look at it and go, wow, you're flying around the world, you've got this brand, you're the founder, it's glamorous, good on you. And there's elements of which, you should never complain about that, because they're once in a lifetime things. But scaling something at the rate you did, that puts a lot of stress on the supply chain, on your leadership, on keeping the investors happy in this case. Any advice on how you go through that scaling process? Because I see a lot of great ideas or creators that just don't get to that point. They've got a wonderful idea, but they can't make that jump to scale, which is what they ultimately want to do. Any advice on how to navigate through that?
The first thing to say is I'm scared of that happening again. which is probably the wrong thing to say when I'm at the beginning of launching, 2 other businesses. I think having a great team around me was brilliant. All I did over that period is started doing everything, and gradually everything got taken off me in a good way. And so I think I was doing the Instagram for like 2 years, and I was, and actually I just got more and more funneled and focused into what I could really do for the business. And you can only do that when you have a great team around you. And so having an amazing team of bright, young, driven, hungry, curious people who for the most part were equally naive and not from big drinks industry backgrounds. The real requirement to join Seedlip was that you needed to love nature. I didn't really care whether you drank alcohol or not, it didn't matter, but you needed to love nature. And so, yeah, I think having a great team, I think it's really easy in this day and age, if you spend enough time on things like LinkedIn, and I do this at the moment, to kind of go, oh, fuck, we're not growing fast enough. We're not growing fast enough. We need to be bigger. Oh my God, it looks like they launched yesterday and now they're like massive. And we have this weird aversion to actually building something and actually growing something and doing it properly. I think everything seems to be overnight, and it's not. And, I've interviewed enough people, I guess, on our podcast where people might have just come across them, or they're a singer that, went absolutely huge on TikTok, but they've been singing for 15 years,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I do think it's important to enjoy it. I do think it's important to have a really great team around you. And I do think it's important to kind of do it properly.
I resonate with that a lot, actually. I mean, even if I just take podcasts as an example, I think thinking long term, the amount of podcasts that have a go and then give up, so I think there's a bit of consistency and persistence is a big part of it. And as you say, having a team around you that, it's the old, I don't know if it's Branson that came up with this, employ people better than you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Just understand the key skill sets you need for growth in the different areas, whether it's supply chain or production, whatever it is, and just hire for, talent in those areas.
Yeah. That was only an exercise in what am I good at? And therefore there's my hiring strategy. I'm just going to hire for what I'm not good at. That's literally as simple as it was.
Yeah. Now, you did in 3.5 years, right? You got to an exit.
Yeah.
So you 50%, you halved the average time. And by the way, the 7 years is the success. This is the other thing I found wild, actually, looking at the soft drink data that I'd looked at, is the 7 years was only the successes. Boy, there were for every one success, there were 19 failures.
Yes.
So you're basically looking at the real successes, had the persistence, they carried on, did the right things. They didn't go too mass too soon as well. So they stuck at the high end, created the adoption there, and then kind of blew up. But to do in 3.5 years is genuinely incredible. How do you come to make that decision with Diageo to go, right, this is the moment that I do the exit? Because it's personal, right? Because it's you, you.
It is personal, but we'd already cleared that up. It was already part of the deal. It was already baked into the investment deal. And that really suited me because I had already known very well that my skill set is not about scale. I am not interested in scale. And I'm not the best person to scale a business or kind of, have a big business. I'm really good at the beginning and getting things started. I also knew and understood that I did want to have a big impact, and that continues, that wish continues. I want to make a big change and I want to have a big impact. And in order to make a big impact, I couldn't do that on my own. And so it was a very deliberate choice to want to work with a company that was global, premium, understood spirits and cocktail culture, had a track record of building huge brands, like iconic brands, and had an understanding that founders were important in doing that. And Diageo are second to none at that.
Yeah.
And so I had no hang-ups on, am I selling out? It was all open, transparent. You join the business. This is what we're doing. This is the goal. We want to change the way the world drinks. That was always the goal. And Diageo are going to help us do that. And so it was really, really clear, really, really simple, and really, really open. I gave 20% of the business to the team. And so everybody was driving in the same direction. And it was all open, transparent, and was, hugely incentivizing for people.
I love the humility in that, to know like what you're good at and unique at and what you want help with. And like, as you say, you don't get any bigger or better than Diageo to get a non-alcoholic spirit out into the world's best bars and retailers.
The longer I do this, the more I realize that I'm dreadful at selling, and I'm not excited about selling, and I don't get excited about selling. I'm dreadful at marketing. I don't know. I think the more I learn about my brain, the more I realize that me and marketing are real opposing forces. I hate brands. I'm really skeptical of them. And I don't have a good enough understanding, I don't think, of like how to market a brand. What I can do is make really delicious products and start them in the right way that means that they are set off in the right direction from a strategic perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of becoming increasingly okay with that.
I love the fact you say that. And you're one of the best marketers on the planet because you're so clear about why you're here. Your eye for design is incredible. Your storytelling is on point. The way you describe, the drink when you're not drinking, there will be people paid hundreds of thousands of pounds in big soft drink companies around the world trying to get to that clarity of insight. Your ability to influence other people and get them to tell your story for you, inspire a big corporate organization like Diageo to scale you up. That's marketing. It's all genius marketing.
Okay.
A lot of people could learn from that.
Maybe then it's more about the some of the execution of marketing to a consumer where I struggle. But actually building the foundations of asking a really great marketer like, hey, look, I've made this and clarified it and made it simple and sticky. Now can you go and like...
But I think what you've done is you've done the really, really, really hard bit. Because most people shortcut to advertising when they say marketing, which they shouldn't do, right?
Yes.
But most people with an advertising brief are trying to invent some authenticity and tell a story, right?
Yeah.
You've created all that organically and naturally and authentically. So when you look up Seedlip, you get your story. You get the farming story, the botanical story, the maturation, the whole thing, right? You've got naturally what 99% of the world's brands don't have already, which is authenticity, which I think is marketing gold dust.
Yeah, I think it's, I see this really clearly with Silver, with our age spirit at the moment, that I fucking love trees so much. And they are so full of flavor that the world has had absolutely no idea about, apart from oak, basically. There are 73,000 tree species on this planet. Like, the scope of this project is enormous, but what it is giving me is, I guess, I'm going to such extremes that most people will not bother to go to. Nobody, I've bought 2 domestic ovens to cook wood. No one's fucking gonna do that, or stand out there and pick thousands of hazel catkins just at the right time when they are so fluffy and powdery and full of pollen, and then distill them straight away so that I can capture all that freshness. And like, this is all scalable, but that's not important at the moment. What's important is, slightly selfishly going, I think there's an opportunity for something that's neat and that you sip and that's got that ritual and that occasion of aged spirits that you don't have to fill with mixers, that's full-bodied, but actually gives me a real opportunity to learn more about trees.
Yeah. But the other thing I think you've naturally done, even in the way you tell that story, is you're joining some dots together that other people just don't join. You're most people would stop at I really love trees and they'd become really obsessed with trees, right?
Yeah.
Some people might stop at I love distilling in my back garden, right?
Yeah.
Some people might stop at I'm a great designer and I love designing, right? But the jump I think you've made, which is incredible, is you've brought those things together to create something that didn't exist in the world before. And that's what I find so inspiring about it.
Oh, well,
and then
you
managed to package it in a way that people go, yeah, that makes sense. Why didn't that exist before? I
Yeah.
mean, back to your season as well. Sorry, I was going to link to that. Years and years ago, I was brand manager for about 5 minutes on Angostura bitters.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I know.
Amazing.
It's the most insane thing. In fact, they invited me out to Trinidad and Tobago, right? Because I'd invented a cocktail book, and they were so excited by the fact that someone had shown a bit of love to the brand.
Love it.
They said, "Come and show the board." And,
Love it.
I had this 2-week trip to Tobago to join their board and talk about a cocktail book. It was insane that that would be a thing that got me an invite out there. Anyway, random. But I remember, even then, the pink gin and tonics, just adding a little seasoning to a drink and it transforms the occasion. But you've got an amazing insight there, haven't you? And the way you frame that as the salt and pepper of drinks, I just think it's very clever.
I think this stands up for any food and drink product mostly, and it's based on the fact that, and I'm talking sort of startups and small businesses here and founder-led kind of brands, but when you start from the point that 9 out of 10 are going to fail, right? You're kind of like, okay, the odds are really against me. So therefore, your next move has to be, how can I do whatever I can to ensure that I've got the right conditions to mean that I've got that chance of being that one that succeeds? And relevance and need in people's lives, I think of everything, it doesn't matter how good it tastes or what it looks like. If it's not meeting a need in people's lives and therefore it's not relevant to them, I just wouldn't start anything if it didn't have those core components. The next bit is, can it connect in to what is going on in culture? Can it have a place beyond just the product that can sit in people's brains or tag on to various reference points? And so, season is the salt and pepper for drinks. That's very deliberate. Foodies have a big understanding. I went to chef school. I had it drilled into me every day. Season, every day. And foodies who want things to taste nice and will spend money on condiments and seasonings and spices, they know that. And chefs know that. And bartenders do know that too. And so rather than... it's the difference between, let me tell you about cocktail bitters, what the fuck are they? Or, have you heard of Angostura? Let's start by telling you about the competition, who have 85% market share. No, that's probably not the best way to start either. It's trying to find another way, a bit like with Seedlip, of instead of going, do you drink alcohol? It's, what do you drink when you're not drinking alcohol? It's a real different frame on it. And so, season's only about a year in, but having, a white pack and a black pack, making it simple for consumers that you've got a light one that's green and lovely, put it in your lighter kind of drinks, and a dark one for your darker kind of drinks. It's not kind of, branding by numbers, but I just got to make things simple for people.
Yeah, it's really well done.
And
If Angostura, you wouldn't start with Angostura, would you? Like if you were to kind of create the category that's being created, the oversized label and the weirdness of it and all that kind of thing. I wanted to move, if I can, to talk about your podcast and your charity as well, the Hidden 20%.
Yeah,
extremely powerful and inspiring as well. You've obviously Seedlip's now moved into Diageo. You're still inventing. What led to the decision on Hidden 20%? You talked about earlier, discovering you had autism. It's quite late, presumably, to discover that. How did that come about?
Yeah, so ironically, it came about from, where are we, summer 2022, starting to just connect into hearing some snippets of other people talking on podcasts and kind of going, that sounds a little bit like me. I'd never heard the word neurodiversity before. I knew such a tiny, ignorant, limited amount about dyslexia or Tourette's or autism or ADHD. I had no idea that it's 20% of the population globally, like 1.6 billion people. I hadn't even really properly understood the fact that every single person on the planet has a different brain, you know? And so I went and, I had this 12-week assessment, and the psychologist said, congratulations, Ben, you're autistic. And I kind of really felt that. I really believed that. And nobody was surprised when I told them, which, feels like I was kind of the last to know. But it just answered loads of questions and made a lot of sense. And I've been able to then, I guess, start embracing that and learning about that and kind of going, fuck, I've got this tool and I've got a photographic memory and I have really acute senses, palate, hearing, smell. I've never really realized what I can do with these things or why I gravitate towards making ridiculously long Gantt charts or obsessing over tree species or just attention to detail on hiding my ancestors' initials in, the fox on the bottle of Seedlip, or just all these little things. And also why, ironically, for creating drinks businesses that are about including people and socializing, I'm incredibly antisocial. I'm not the consumer for my drinks. I sort of, in the nice possible way, I don't really care what happens after I've made them. That's the most important thing for me, is kind of making them and then finding other people to work with who want to take them on and make them big in the world and make them sell and all the rest of it. So I was diagnosed, and I then I started doing a whole load of research into it, and I found two things. One, so many people that I look up to, so many of my heroes or so many icons in the world and in history thought differently. And lots of people listening will know the 1984 Apple ad. Most of those people featured were neurodivergent. Everyone from Newton and Agatha Christie and Marie Curie and Einstein, except like all these people were neurodivergent, all these incredible contributions and inventions and discoveries. So I had that on one hand. And then I had on the other hand, the 8 out of 10 autistic adults are unemployed. And 85% of children who are diagnosed dyslexic are ashamed of it. And 94% of autistic children are bullied at school. And autism is the second leading cause of death for autistics. And some studies of up to 85% of people in our prison system are neurodivergent. And we've got waiting lists for assessments on ADHD of up to 22 years in some places in the country. I just couldn't understand these two things. So I was like, I just want to join the gap. And this is about telling the truth. And then I did another piece of work on looking at why have these huge social change campaigns happened, like climate change, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, Jamie's School Dinners, Paralympics. Like, what are the keys here? What are the codes? Because this is not about a physical thing. I know about that. This is sort of about a movement and ideas. And so I broke that down, and I was like, you just need a big enough cause that affects enough people. Okay, good. Got 1.6 billion people on the planet. Great. You need a medium and a format that can travel and scale. Okay, digital, pretty good at that. Great. And then you need some spokespeople. And so I was like, great, I've got three. I've got experts, I've got entrepreneurs, and I've got celebrities. Okay, great. So yeah, I thought, well, I'm going to start a charity and we're going to launch a podcast and a campaign. That was the beginning of last year. And we're going to sort of put in place some role models and some representation that so many people have not had to basically try and break this cycle. And it's going really well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know, I was listening to you talking to Heston Blumenthal, right? Well, firstly, congratulations. I mean, like, what an awesome guy. The the thing in it really hit me hard. I have to say, I cried after listening to it. It was sorry. I'll say it again. Sorry.
It's okay.
Hang on. Yeah, Heston said something in that episode which really hit me, which was he was talking about himself, said, I was the last to know. And I thought, damn, why is that? I've experienced people that have been through really tough things and they were the last to know. And nobody helped. Nobody spoke about it. And it was the not speaking about it that just got to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, kudos to you for speaking about it. And people we look up to, like Heston, who are like role models, or Millie McIntosh, the people we've had on. It's amazing to see these people. Like, we admire them. They're so successful. And then have that vulnerability. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, and I think it's, I was getting to sit down and talk to like the world's leading expert on autism.
Yeah.
Or, someone like Heston, who's my fucking hero, who said to me, I'll come on, Ben, but we have to go for dinner beforehand. Oh, okay.
That's a tough one.
Okay.
if you insist, Heston.
If you insist. Yeah. You can fucking choose the restaurant. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like if I think about all my projects, they're all incredibly selfish, actually, because they are all about me wanting to, I don't know, continue my family's legacy of working with the land, or getting fully into my foodiness and my chef background and getting to work with just the most amazing ingredients with season, or getting to dine out, learning about trees and woodworking and some of the science and the process around how you do maturation without barrels, and like just some of that geeky kind of stuff. And then the hidden 20%, my daughter's just been diagnosed autistic. She's 5. She's absolutely brilliant. And I don't want her to be one of the stats.
Yeah.
And so, but the trick with all of this is, whilst these are all selfish pursuits, they all have a place in the world and they all have a relevance to enough people that make it a kind of win-win in that sense. And so, yeah, there are so many similarities I'm finding between the sort of non-out movement and the neurodiversity movement, not just because they both start with N, but they're both about breaking down beliefs. They're both full of myths. They're both charged with stigma. They're both about, changing perception.
Yeah.
They both need role models and great examples of sort of what good looks like. And so, yeah, I that feels really good, because that feels like everything that I'm doing feels connected in some way, even though they are about, drinks and a charity and actually disconnected. Yeah, so it's nice to, I haven't done a podcast where I've sort of talked about all of them like this, which, is nice to do.
You asked this lovely question, actually, which is, if I could give you a pill and it could take it away tomorrow, would you take it?
I definitely wouldn't.
Yeah.
No
Isn't
way.
that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
No way. And even though, and I personally don't look back and go, oh, if only I'd known, or why didn't anyone spot it? Or I don't. I'm too sort of matter of fact and literal to kind of go, well, that's waste of time thinking about that. It's pointless energy. But yeah, Heston it was sad hearing that he was the last to know, because he was really vulnerable. He's sectioned, and like life took a really bad turn. And it is interesting the reaction I get. Not that I go around telling people I'm autistic, but it's funny. I usually get 2 reactions, and one is people laugh and actually think I'm joking.
Oof.
They're not being mean, but it's kind of they're a bit ADHD, or I'm just being a bit autistic. It's those sort of where these things become adjectives, or people dive into the my mate is really bad. He's autistic and he's really bad, which is just really dismissive, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's really dismissive. So we've got such a long way to go even further in what's going on in the US, which is really, really terrifying what's happening over there, specifically with autism. But we've got a long way to go to kind of just be able to talk about this and understand that everybody's brain behaves differently. And actually there can be some real greatness and some skills that can come from, you know, having a diverse load of brains on a project, which the marketing community will always tell you, oh yeah, you want to get loads of different voices in the room. And I remember being agency side where, yeah, let's get that guy and he's a really good thinker, or she'll give us a great, but actually when you put it on the lens of like, actually have we got a diverse mix of brains in here? Yeah, I'm excited to kind of see what magic will come.
And again, you're applying your marketing genius to, I like your great minds think differently, kind of just reframing of that whole thing, which is amazing. Maybe to finish up then, what do you hope happens next for you for Hidden 20%?
I mean, the big hope is to close the charity. That's the goal. And so the faster I can do that, the better, which is, however, whether that's a strange goal or not.
A fast exit again.
Yeah, it's a fast exit. And we're still trying to work out, how do we know and what does that mean and how do you measure that and what's that based on? But last year was a kind of test, and you know, we built 150,000 community and won some great awards, and yeah, we can safely say we've got something that people want and that is relevant. And so now we've got to figure out, okay, if we want to close the charity, because we've broken the cycle and we've driven enough awareness or education, or we've put a stop to bullying rates or suicide rates. We just need to figure that out now. But yeah, just want to close it.
Great. Well, that's a great place to close. And by anyone listening and watching, check it out. Hidden 20% podcast, wherever you get podcasts, and go check the website out as well. Got more information on there, and go listen to those stories. They're very powerful. Ben, thank you, mate. It's been,
thank you.
I personally find this so inspiring because, you know, you're doing a lot of stuff I dream about. So it's just like, it's just so cool. And mate, you are one of the best marketers in the world. So take that away from this episode.
Oh, thank you.
Good to have you on, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you very much for listening or watching Uncensored CMO. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching, hit subscribe there as well. I'd also love to get a review. Reviews make a big difference on other people discovering the show. So please do leave a review wherever you get your podcast. If you want to contact me, you can do. I'm over on X at Uncensored CMO, or on LinkedIn, where I'm under my own name, John Evans. Thanks for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.